All right. Okay. Well, yeah, Craig's actually kind of an author, if you will, on this talk. So it's a nice to have him leading it. So when I say something about Craig, I can just point to him. So this is kind of terrestrial ecosystems, and so we were kind of given. Let me see how this works. Okay, that'll work. We were given some questions. So what I did is kind of broke the talk into these 3 questions. So what are the significant achievements in your discipline from the last 25 years? And that fits really nicely with me because I started almost slightly more than 25 years ago. And I'm going to focus on ITEX, but because that's what I do. So I started my work in 1994, 1995. I started in 95. The project started the year before me. And I worked with Pat Weber. A lot of you probably have come across Pat in the past. And he kind of pioneered the ITEX project, which is just the idea that we'd put out all these little greenhouses on the tundra and do that throughout the Arctic and then kind of compare results. It was really simplistic. It was the idea that he talked about, the ice people were going to measure the changes in ice over the next, because everyone was talking about climate change. And, so they've got really easy measurements that they can do, and climate people can do easy measurements. And what could the botanists do? So what we decided, or what they decided, was we'll put out these little chambers and see what the plants do. So it's really simplistic. You just look at plants and you look at like when flowering occurs, how tall they get, reproduction, that kind of stuff. So here's just some simple measurements that have been done for years, and now it's quite powerful because we've documented this for so long. So simple things, count flowers. So here's Cassiope, really pretty out there, and you just go and count flowers. And you can kind of see the chambers have more flowers than the control. Of course, I picked like the best chamber and the worst control. But the data actually show that, so this is like lots of years. We've got the open circles are warmed plots, and the filled are control plots, and it's a bunch of years, and it's flowering over the summer. And you can see that the scale there is 500. So these poor students are counting 500 flowers in a plot. But you can see really clearly that flowering is earlier and more when it's warmer, which is very intuitive, but we've got that data now that we've been doing it for 20 years or 25 years, almost 30 now. We've got the control plots showing that they're changing as well. And then if you just turn this into, instead of day of the year at the bottom, so that's just, basically the calendar date. If you change that to thawing degree days, kind of hard to see, but on the left, that's just the temperature. And you see like the brown ones that kind of go off into nowhere, they're at peak flowering when we left. That was a really cold year. if you kind of look at the graph there. The pointer doesn't seem to be pointing, but you can kind of see here, I use this point. Oh no, you can't see this pointer. Anyhow, the brown one kind of moves to the middle. Some other really simple measurements that, again, having lots and lots of years of data shows pretty powerfully. It's just the tallness of some of these plants. So carex is the dominant plant out there. Grass, that's like everywhere. And so just really simply going out with a ruler and measuring how tall it is, and you can see, so we just call that the inflorescence height, or just how tall it is. and we've got it Upyavik, we've got it Akasuk, and then we've got warmed and control. And what's really nice is by comparing Barrow to Akasuk, we've got a temperature gradient, and then the warmed plots versus the control plots temperature gradient. It's as close to a straight line as you'll get in biology. As it gets warmer, plants get taller. Again, seems intuitive, but there's a lot of things that seem intuitive that don't always turn out that way. This is one of them that did, or does. The one that most people care the most about is the plant cover, right? So what plants are out there? So we go out with a point frame and record every plant at every point on that frame. And you can use that to then determine what plants are there. So here's real simple. We've got the different colors as the different plant types over the different years. So you can see we started point framing in 1995. We've got the control plots on the left, the warmed plots on the right. You're probably more interested in just the control plots. Most people are, because we want to document the changes occurring. And you can see the evergreen shrubs in green. It's getting thicker, it's getting more of them. The graminoids, the blue, there's more of them. That's true if you look over time. That's also true if you look at the warmed plots. So it's really nice about having the warming experiment is you can really clearly say, yes, this is due to warming, because other stuff is changing out there. It could be drier, it could be, disturbance, it could be some other, the caribou, the lemming. So if you're just doing the control plots, there's always a question, what's the real driver? By then having that warming experiment kind of associated with it, it gives much more credence to the idea that it's truly just the temperature. So you can see pretty big changes. And that the blue line, or the graminoids, kind of stop. So it starts out with shrubs, then so deciduous shrubs, evergreen shrubs, forbs, kind of dandelion-like stuff, pretty flowers, and then graminoids. So that blue stops at kind of the vascular plants, and then the rest is your cryptogams, your mosses and lichens, and then there's a lot of litter out there and standing dead, tons of standing dead. All right, so that was just a kind of some of the stuff that we've done. Because we've been doing this for so long, this is now part of the ITEX network. So I just pulled from Google Scholar the ITEX network publications, and most of them, so I just did them in order of how many times they're cited. Most of those, the Barrow data set is one of the pillars of, and that's the checks on the side. So and then the Barrow, our group is also part of the steering committee. So we're central to that network. Now, in 2009, we started as the AON, and that fits much more with kind of landscape and terrestrial ecosystem change in general. So, you've always got to get funded. You've always got to make your stuff new and exciting, which is kind of hard to do when you've been doing something for 30 years. But, you got to do something to make that. So what we did is started looking much more at the landscape. As kind of a foundation of that, we put in these, we call it the tram, but it's just this two towers with this little trolley car that goes down it, and we record everything you could put a sensor on, mostly doing like hyperspectral. We also does the height. We do basically, we've got a 3D camera, anything that the sensor will fit on there, and the idea is you can make measurements daily, and then we've got this for all time. And so presumably 50 years from now, someone could download all this data and show how the tundra has changed since then. So here's just really simply the NDVI, how green it is. And so we've got Upyavik, we've got Akasuk, we've got Toolik Lake. And you can see that Barrow's not very green compared to the other two. And you can see that it's not as, it's much more wavy, whereas like Toolik Lake has a real clear defined green season, and we don't, which many of you would already know. We also are looking at the landscape. So this is what's oftentimes called the calm grid or the ARCS grid. If you go out on the BEO, there's all these poles. And the idea was, these were put in like 92. And the idea is to document long-term change. Again, everyone was thinking, hey, the Arctic's going to change a lot. We want to document that. And you can see our two sites and then our little tram. And then, so points, we're documenting vegetation change, terrestrial ecosystem change. And just kind of look at the cover, just really simply at Akasuk and at Barrow. This is only the last 10 years. I just put a line there. That's the 100% cover. So if you were here 10 years ago, and particularly in Akasuk, again, the blue kind of ends vascular plants, you'd only have about 50% cover. There's a lot of bare ground. If you go out there now, you're at 150%. That's crazy. That's how much it's changed in the last 10 years. And the NDVI, the satellites are picking that up. Akasuk is just off the charts. Barrow's off the charts too, but not as much as Akasuk. And there's been some massive changes. We're also documenting just the landscape itself. So the microtopography. So this is just showing, originally Craig and his group did kites, now we do drones. And because that change in the topography is driving all kinds of processes. All right, so that's just kind of a backdrop of the type of stuff. So we have the question, what are the most urgent questions for the future? I think these are to most people here. There's the feedback, less snow gets less reflected, which means it gets warmer, less snow, warmer. That's other people doing that. But the plants actually fit into that as well, because if you got some plants that stick up, then certainly if you go from tundra to forest, then you are much different solar radiation all year round. And that's a huge feedback. We've also obviously then got the carbon. So these are kind of the three that have been driving a lot of the research for the last 20 years and will probably continue. More close to home, we're documenting really big changes in microtopography and in vegetation. So we want to know, how are the berries changing? How are the wildlife changing? How is that impacting the marine inputs? And that's some of the work that Craig is working really closely on. The third question is, what facilities do we need? Well, what's really obvious is we need labs. We've got pretty good labs at the BARC. We need transportation, trucks and stuff. That's pretty good. Storage, a lot of times people forget about storage. We need good storage. Room and board, it'd be really nice to have a cafeteria. Right? We've got beds, but there's a lot of knowledge needs. We've got, it'd be nice. We've got really good community connections. So the kind of the bottom corner, we've gotten pretty good outreach. UIC Science has done a really good job with that. But, if you go to like Toolik Lake, they're sharing information. So they have kind of basic GIS, They've actually started to do plant phenology and, when birds arrive and stuff. It'd be really nice to do some of that here. Just have some core data. Maybe neon fits that niche, but so far that hasn't really been just generally available to everyone. And then, just knowledge about shipping and so forth. And then the last thing I'll just leave with is if you're supporting long-term projects, you really need to think about some kind of gap support. We've been doing this for almost 30 years, and there's always an in-between a project. Luckily, if you've got, Craig's always had like 50 projects going, so he could just use one of his other ones to keep the one in between. But not everyone has that. So maybe as a collective group, it would be nice to have some kind of support for some of those in betweens. And I'll leave it there.